Okay, looks like we're ready to go. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting for the 17th of November, 2022. It is Thursday morning, about 7:32. And before we call the meeting to order, there's a few things that we need to cover. We are continuing to have folks tune in virtually in one form or another, and sometimes we have two matters that they can call in about, either community comment or public hearing or both, but today it's just community comment that you'll be able to call in for. That'll be your only opportunity during the meeting for members of the public to participate. Here's the call-in number on the screen, and then enter the PIN number and press *1 to speak to an operator. That operator will get you to Director Benarott, and then Director Benarott will bring you into the HRA. So you're allowed to speak today if you call in during community comment about anything that's of concern to you, except something that's scheduled for a future public hearing before the HRA or is on today's HRA agenda. So keep that in mind if you think you want to be calling in. Again, that call-in number for community comment, 786-496-5601, and there's the conference PIN number as well. And that covers, I think, everything that we need to cover for now. Thanks for your patience while we work in this virtual world of this hybrid situation. Now I'm going to call the meeting of the HRA to order and ask our Administrative Support Specialist, Liz Olson, to call the roll.
Commissioner Jackson. Here. Commissioner Anderson.
Here.
Commissioner Pierce.
Here.
Chair Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, folks. And now we've got a meeting agenda that's been published, both for the HRA and the public. Is there anyone on the HRA that wishes to modify the agenda in any form, or any staff member? All right, hearing nothing, is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda as published?
So moved.
So moved.
All right, we've got a motion from Commissioner Jackson, second from Commissioner Pierce, to approve the meeting agenda as published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now we are back to community comment. Folks, if there's anybody in the audience, we'll take anybody in the audience first. I don't see anyone out there that would wish to comment during community comment. Do we have anybody on the line?
Good morning. No, we do not yet have anyone on the call. There is a slight delay with the broadcast, so I would recommend we wait 1 minute before moving on. My clock shows that it's 7:35, so I'll come back to you when I have a caller, or 7:36, whichever is first.
Thank you.
One of the longest minutes of the day has now passed. I have no callers, so you may move forward with your agenda.
I'm glad you've got that good sense of humor of yours intact here early this morning after your wintry drive in this morning from some distance. All right, our practice is that the executive director, who's also our city manager, would respond to committee comments from the prior meeting, but I don't see that there are any comments to respond to.
There were no community comments at our previous meeting.
All right, good. That's your big part of the agenda this morning.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Next is the consent agenda. Is there anyone on the HRA that wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? Hearing nothing, is there a motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda in a single motion?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion and second to adopt the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Those are approved. The bulk of our time this morning is going to be taken up in the reports and recommendations portion of the agenda. And Bill Neuendorf, our Economic Development Manager, has both of those matters for us and things that we've been working on. And the first matter is a potential loan agreement with the Edina Chamber of Commerce in connection with the Innovation Lab that's been created. Really, this will be quite an interesting part of the morning, I think, for all of us as a continuation of our last conversation. And with us this morning for questions, we've got Lori Severson from the Chamber of Commerce, Paul Moody, who's a board member on the Chamber, Grant Turpin, I think, is around. No? I see a few other Chamber members here as well.
Mr. Turpin is on the WebEx, so
Okay.
if we need to turn to him, I will go to that screen for you.
All right, very good. Thank you. Well, Mr. Neuendorf, good morning, and look forward to presentation.
Yes, good morning. Bill Neuendorf, the city's Economic Development Manager. We're here this morning with the first agenda item is seeking action on the proposed loan agreement with for the Edina Chamber of Commerce. This loan is to start up their Edina Innovation Lab. We have representatives from the Chamber of Commerce with us this morning. Our intention is for me to run through briefly an overview of the action that we're requesting, and then Lori Severson and Paul Moody are with us from the Chamber of Commerce to give more information about the Innovation Lab and what the intentions are there. And of course, we're always happy for any questions along the way. So the Chamber of Commerce is seeking funding to establish this Edina Innovation Lab. Essentially, it's a small business development center. This type of project is aligned with the goals that are established in the Vision Edina document, as well as the Economic Development chapter of the Edina Comprehensive Plan. Last year, the city, the HRA actually, established the SPARK program using some unallocated TIF dollars that were made available, and that those funds are available for construction financing. Earlier this fall, we visited you and gave you an overview of some terms that we had started to negotiate on this. We've taken those terms and turned them into a loan agreement with the assistance of special legal counsel at Dorsey & Whitney. And as Ms. Bennerat mentioned, Grant Turpin, the attorney that prepared the document, is online if there's any questions about the document itself. But at this point, I feel confident that that we've answered your questions, provided some additional information that we'll get in front of you here, and we are seeking action this morning. So first, a brief overview about small business development centers. Different types of organizations call them different things. There's a lot of different shades of how they work, who they serve, and what they do. But this is not unique to Edina. Other communities do this, other states do it, counties do it, and colleges and universities also get involved in this area. Some of our research was based on some larger scale projects. We visited facilities in Milwaukee, Green Bay, and Madison to look at some larger accelerator type programs that had newer facilities. Really outstanding examples. We learned a lot from them. There might be a partnership opportunity there in the future. But I think the ones that are a little bit more similar to what we're planning on here is something that the city of Bloomington is doing and something that Brooklyn Park is doing. In both of those communities, those cities are taking a much more assertive approach to this challenge, whereas the Brooklyn Park HRA purchased a property for $7 million. And they're using a portion of it as a small business resource center that they are in the process of, it's actually under construction now, so building the space out, leasing it at reduced rates, and providing services to entrepreneurs and small businesses. The city of Bloomington is taking a similar approach. The city there has actually donated property to this effort. They're seeking federal funding to build it, and that city has made a 20-year obligation, or 20-year commitment to fund that program out of the city budget. So we're looking at a similar outcome here in Edina, but using a much different approach that I'll outline now. I had mentioned that the reason that we've been looking at this and pursuing this for honestly the last couple years is rooted in our guiding documents here in Edina. The Vision Edina plan identifies the strategic goal of considering the inclusion of an incubator or a co-working type space. When we wrote that, we used the word incubator. Honestly, at the time, I didn't know the difference between an incubator, an accelerator, or an innovator. So that was a term that we used. And then in the comprehensive plan, that got expounded and expanded in the goals and policies section with the goal of not only creating an incubator type of space, but also taking other actions to support the development of an entrepreneurial community in Edina. It's a community that's here already. They're often in someone's kitchen. We're seeking to give them a place to thrive and grow. So with this program, we're looking at the alignment of the comprehensive plan and also that Spark funding program. The objectives would be to support the entrepreneurial economy and small businesses in Edina, to help them in their post-pandemic struggles and endeavors to move forward and thrive, but without creating a multi-year funding obligation for the HRA. I don't think that's in our budget. I don't think it's intended to be in our budget, but that's something that the Chamber of Commerce is capable and willing to do. We've also included flexibility, because one thing we've learned from the pandemic is that you have to be flexible and pivot and not just stop, but turn and continue to move forward. One of the general goals of the HRA is to reoccupy vacant buildings. That whole redevelopment concept, we don't like vacant buildings here. Job creation is also important to the community. And one other item that we've been thinking about for a while, but we've been unable to have a funding mechanism. But we've chatted from time to time about establishing a revolving loan fund. And with these Spark dollars that are available, we have an option of using them once. We could spend them once. We could issue grants and give the funds away. Or we could loan the money and establish a revolving loan fund so that we can fund one project today. When the loan's repaid, we can reuse those monies, fund another loan, fund another project in the future, and then just keep it revolving until the funds run out. So this provides a first opportunity to actually act on that type of endeavor. So Lori Severson and Paul Moody are here this morning. They'll give us a much deeper overview of what the Innovation Lab is, why they chose this location, why they chose this structure. So I'll leave that for them. But the space that they're looking at is in the vacant office building at 7201 Metro. This property was purchased by new ownership right before the pandemic, realizing they need to make some massive transformational changes to that building. The building is getting leased. There's actually a couple businesses that are in there today. Other suites are under construction, so it's going in the right direction. It's got great momentum. We hope to be part of that momentum to see it continue. The estimated budget for this project, for the construction of it, is $800,000. We're still phrasing that as a budget because until there's a signed lease and a signed construction contract, those prices are still fluid. So currently the construction estimate is at $579,000. We expect there to be escalation. That estimate was from back in August. By the time this contract gets signed, it'll be December. So we're expecting some escalation there, hopefully not. But then there's also incidentals, project management, hiring the architect to do the construction drawings. So that's how we're getting to the $800,000. The landlord is making a contribution here as well. So we think based on today's numbers, we're anticipating that the actual loan amount is between $650 to $725. In the loan agreements, you'll see that we included a cap of $800. So it's almost like a line of credit, if you will. If they need up to the $800,000, we're recommending that we make that available. Hopefully they need in that $650 range. It's not their endeavor to spend as much money as they can, Their goal is to spend as little as they need to make a brilliant place. The Chamber's tried to work with traditional lenders, but they've not been able to secure a private loan because they don't have the collateral. It's a leased space, not an owned space. So we've prepared this loan agreement based on the terms that we discussed at our last meeting. So it's a 7-year loan, which matches the lease. Construction would start in December or January of this year, but contracts would be executed by the end of this year with action to follow as soon as possible. We're expecting that move-in would happen by June 30th. If all goes well, it'll happen in April, but sometimes things don't go as you expect. The loan would be a simple interest mortgage or a simple interest loan, 2% interest, 7-year amortization schedule with repayment starting when they occupy the space. These are not traditional banking terms. These are terms that have been prepared to make sure that this project can go forward. We're not trying to maximize the return to the HRA. We're trying to make sure that this good project can succeed. We're also recommending that a portion of this loan be forgiven based on goals identified in the comprehensive plan. I had mentioned that some other communities are putting a lot more skin in the game in their facilities. They're actually spending millions of their own money and long-term commitments. At this point, we don't feel that's the right approach for this project, but since they are able to achieve several of the goals in the comprehensive plan, I'm recommending that we forgive up to $250,000 of the loan proceeds based on 2 conditions. And these conditions have been modified based on your input in our last conversation. So first off, they need to have a fundraising campaign to help long-term operating costs of the facility. So the goal is to forgive up to $150,000 of the debt as they have their fundraising operations. So this is one of those chicken and the egg kinds of things. They need construction funds, they need operating funds. Which comes first? We're recommending that we put forth our show of support as the first step. The second element where they could have some of these proceeds forgiven would be if they're successful in delivering equity-based programming. What we're recommending is an additional forgiveness of up to $50,000 for up to 2 cohorts that are not your traditional cohorts. So oftentimes we find when you do your same level of outreach, you reach the same people, and that can be one route for success. But along the way, we've learned that a lot of people are left out, frozen out completely. So the idea here is to encourage the Chamber to make a concerted, focused effort to reaching out to people that often are overlooked or not addressed or don't feel comfortable getting engaged in these kind of programs. That will probably require the engagement of a partner that has expertise dealing with communities and entrepreneurs that might not use English as their first language, or they might just be intimidated by a big program. So there probably is some type of partnership there. But we're recommending that an additional $100,000 potentially be forgiven if they reach success in that endeavor. And
does that become then some type of a scholarship program where we would be paying the tuition?
Essentially. We haven't worked out the precise details yet, but typically the participants pay $6,000 to be part of this program. So if they have a cohort of 10 people, this would pretty much cover that revenue. In conversations with Annette and Lori and Paul, it still seems important that each member have a stake in this. This is a long-term commitment. It's not a long-term. It's a commitment by the participants. You can't just show up once and get everything you need. You have to have some skin in the game so that you're there for the full program. So we'd still want them to have some kind of contribution, but we haven't figured out what that looks like yet. So the loan terms are not very detailed in that regard. How we've structured it is that when the Chamber is ready to implement that type of cohort, they put their detailed plan together, submit that to the city manager, the HRA director, for review and approval. If we feel that it meets the equity goals of the city and is reasonably able to be implemented, we would sign off on it. And upon it being completed, we would then say it was a success and forgive $50,000 for that cohort. So the maximum forgiveness would be $250,000 for both of those programs. The other loan terms have been beefed up a little bit to provide some remedies just in case something goes wrong, right? You know, we're expecting this to go right, but sometimes things go wrong. So we've added some additional terms and conditions to the document to make sure that this body, the HRA, is kept informed and up to date. So that includes things like an annual report about the progress of the Innovation Lab. It contains a commitment that the lab must remain active for the full term of the lease. If not, there'd be a loan default, and we'd have the ability to go in and restructure that loan. Also, an opportunity in writing that other service agencies, business agencies, could use this space for their programming. Programs like Open to Business, which the city already participates in. The SBA provides programming. Hennepin County provides some programming. All those are offered online, but now we have a place. We have a place to actually meet face-to-face, roll up your sleeves, and come up with some great ideas. The Chamber is definitely open to that, to having those other partners be there, because what they're trying to create here is a hub for the small business community. There'd also be, this is an important thing, an HRA voice on the advisory board that governs the Innovation Lab, to make sure that there's some say and some contribution from this body or your representative that the executive director would appoint to be part of that advisory board, to make sure that over the years it still is aligned with our goals. And just in case something goes horribly wrong, I mentioned in case there's a default, we've got a number of remedies there that Mr. Turpin, the HRA's attorney, helped us prepare. We can always modify the repayment terms if things go wrong. If we wanted to, if it made sense at the time, we'd have the right to sublease the space, not the obligation or commitment to pay for the rent, but if we wanted to assume the lease, we could. The landlord is agreeable to that. And also things like, in case something goes horribly wrong, we'd have the right to seize the equipment, the tables and chairs and computers and that kind of stuff. Or also, in case something goes wrong and the lab doesn't continue, if the HRA thinks it's a good effort that just needs to be revived, we could take ownership of the name, the brand, and the programming. I don't think we ever have to have much conversation about these, but I just wanted to let you know that we have added more remedies in case something does go wrong. But we're poised for this project to go right. We're poised to have this project move forward. I wanted to invite Lori Severson and Paul Moody to the microphone for just a moment, give you a little bit more overview. But the documents are in your packet, and at the end of the program and after your questions are answered, we will be requesting action on this loan agreement.
Any questions for Mr. Neuendorf? Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just briefly, on slide 11, you use the word equity. Since we're talking about loans, I was really confused by that, thinking that we would have an ownership interest in this, because that's what equity in financial terms means. So going forward, if we can use something like outreach or diversity or something, or underserved communities, I would appreciate that, because I'm like, what, we're getting an ownership interest in this? So just it's just a language thing, so thank you.
Sorry for the confusion.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
Commissioner Pierce?
So a couple of questions. One was that one. So when I think about this, I think of minority and women-owned businesses. And so however we word that, great. But the word equity was confusing to me. And then the second one, I might have missed this in there, but what are the actual terms in terms of repayment for the loan? How many years?
Oh, sure. So it's a 7-year loan repayment. So the loan amount is amortized over 7 years. It would commence on the day that they take occupancy, so no later than June 30th of next year. There would be 2 annual repayments, one in January and one on January 2nd and July 1st. Just a little bit easier for our finance department to handle that. And after 7 years, the loan would be repaid in full. Ms. Severson may mention their goal is to pay off the loan early. So with the forgiveness elements, we've written in that at year 5, if they haven't delivered on those efforts, then they would lose the ability to forgive that amount. So they're pushing to move this forward as quickly as they can. But in case, worst case, it would be a 7-year repayment.
Okay. And then the third question might be a question for Ms. Severson, but I'll ask it now. When you're going through the conditions, and maybe this is intuitive to everyone since it's the Edina Innovation Lab, how do we ensure that the businesses that we are investing in are actually Edina businesses? And so that's the other question that I have. Thank you.
And I'll leave that one for Ms. Severson.
Yeah.
Good. I don't have any questions at this time. Commissioner, from the other city council meeting the other evening, you had a question about the $150,000 recommended grant.
And I still do.
Did you want to ask Mr. Newendorf about that?
I can. I thought it would be more appropriate to direct that to the executive director when our considerations come forward. However, thank you for bringing that up. The other evening, as we considered the grant from the ARPA funds that are available to or that the city holds, my question was the $150,000 that is designated in this way is either in lieu of or in addition to, and the answer from the city manager at that time was it's in addition to. So what I view here is that we're granting 150 and then presenting a forgiveness condition of up to 250, which seems like a lot to me. And so I guess, the question becomes, is that our intention when the council has not voted on that grant at this time, although my assumption is that we're continuing forward in that way, and that vote will be made on the 6th, if I recall. Yeah. So I just view this as a total package. So it's not maybe so much as a question, but as a statement in terms of the amount of that we have involved in this. I'll have more as well, but I guess you can look at that as a question,
Sure.
or a statement to respond to.
Sure.
I think for all of us, it was a curiosity. When we needed a clarification. Why at the city council you were asking, as part of the use of ARPA funds, $150,000 for the Edina Innovation Lab, and then we've got some other things going on this morning that you're recommending from a staff standpoint.
Right, and they are additive, so thank you for the question. It's a very good question.
May I just
Please.
refine that question just a little bit? And so the thing that I woke up with this morning was, is that 150, does that, as we consider it further, is that part of the fundraising that would qualify the forgiveness? Is that a yes?
No, I was just shaking my head.
Okay, you understand the question. Excuse me.
Yes, I do understand the question. So both of these programs, the ARPA proposal that the executive director prepared, as well as the loan agreement that we've prepared, they're additive. So the forgiveness portion of the loan would the $250,000 there that's forgiven would be additive to the $150 of ARPA if that's eventually approved. So the city and the HRA's total investment in this deal would be $400,000 if that moves forward. We kept them separate from one another based on the parameters of the laws that govern the monies. The HRA Spark monies can only be used for hard construction costs. They cannot be used for operating, for staff, for supplies, for marketing, for computers, or anything of that nature. So that's why we've kept the Spark funds in their lane. The ARPA funds can be used much more broadly for virtually anything that the recipient feels moves the economy forward and moves that program forward. So while they're additive, the loan agreement is written so that the $150,000 ARPA money does not count as their fundraising. They'll receive it. It'll help their program go. The intention with that is to stimulate additional private investment. There are supporters and investors that are interested and willing and able to make commitments to that fundraising effort. Everyone's waiting around for the first person. What's the first domino that's going to fall? So we're hoping that with the ARPA contribution, we can accelerate that private fundraising. But the loan agreement does not consider the $150,000 as part of the minimum that's necessary for repayment. We've specifically made sure that that is not possible.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions for Manager Neuendorf? All right, let's bring Lori Severson and Paul Moody up and have the Chamber make their portion of the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this morning. My name is Lori Severson, and I'm president of the Edina Chamber of Commerce and our new Edina Innovation Lab. Joining me this morning, I have Annette Wildenauer. Annette is our Chief Innovation Officer and leads the programming for our big program, which you'll hear more about. And then we also have Paul Moody joining us. Paul is our incoming board chair and has been intimately involved in planning, budgeting, everything around the Innovation Lab for the next 5 to 7 years. Also in the audience, we have Beth, who is a current participant in the big program, so I encourage and welcome you to ask Beth any questions that you may have on the programming. She's also an Edina resident. And then we have Don Hutchison, who's been involved in our Innovation Lab conversations for the last 4 years. In order to kick us off, I'm going to turn the mic over to Paul Moody. He has a few comments for you just to get us started this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Severson. Mr.
Thanks,
Moody,
Lori,
welcome.
and good morning, everybody. My name's Paul Moody. I'm a lifelong Edina resident. In fact, I'm a third generation to live in Edina, and now the fourth and fifth generations of my family live here. In other words, we love the community. I've been an Edina Rotarian for over 23 years. I've served on the Edina Community Foundation Board, the Fairview Southdale Hospital Board of Trustees, and now serving on the board of the Edina Chamber. I really believe that involvement and giving back to the community is very important. As I prepared my comments for this morning, I wanted to start with the question of why should you support the request before you? You're stewards of our city resources, and you should do your best to assure the resources are deployed in the best possible way to benefit the community. I personally believe that this is an excellent and unique opportunity for the city to be a partner in helping support our small business community and assist in the economic development. The Innovation Lab is a concept that has been brought to life by the Edina Chamber of Commerce and is something that the entire organization strongly believes in and supports. I've been deeply involved with this, as Lori mentioned, since I joined the board, and as a person who's been in business my entire career, I could not be more impressed and excited with the effort being put forth to bring this to life. The creation of the lab is a study in itself of building a business and the commitment to perseverance and the commitment it takes to do so. As has been mentioned to you, and you'll hear again today, we started without any marketing or space, yet we're able to actually launch the program. You've seen letters from some of the participants and the value and impact it's had on them. There's an energy and a desire for what this lab is doing. We put a great deal of time in assessing the viability of the lab and believe that this will be a financially viable business and will provide wonderful resources to support our small business community. Your support allows us to build out the space we need to grow and flourish. We also appreciate the forgivable portion of the loan, but we want it to be very clear that we will repay the non-forgivable portion of the loan so that you can use those funds to do future good. Being a small business person can be lonely and oftentimes stressful, and having these resources is a gift to every person participating. The learning and connections to other resources in Edina that will happen will be real and will be impactful. I think we can all agree that a strong and healthy business community is critical, and the Innovations Lab mission is to help build the strength and health within our community. It is, in fact, an economic development tool. I wouldn't stand before you today if I didn't truly believe that this request that this is a very worthy request. My wife Gina and I will be supporting this, as I know many others will. And I hope to be and continue to be very closely involved with the Edina Innovation Lab. Edina has always shown leadership, and this is a great opportunity to lead again by joining and supporting the lab. I thank you so much for your consideration of this, and look forward to any questions.
Thanks, Mr. Moody.
Okay, before we get into the details, I thought it might be helpful to address the questions from Commissioner Pierce and Commissioner Anderson. So feel free to let me know if that's not a good approach here, but it might help as we move forward. So the question regarding the additional $149,000 of ARPA money, we are in negotiations and discussions with the Edina Public School District to formulate an entrepreneurship program for high school students. We're not in a position, as you know, to do this on a volunteer basis. It'll take quite a bit of time and staff effort. So we're hoping to use those funds, the ARPA funds, to develop programs such as that. So it would be very separate from the ask today. Today's ask is specifically for construction of the build-out. And then Commissioner Pierce, I'm sorry, your question was around, the programming and how are we looking at that? We don't have the details laid out in the loan agreement. What we plan to do is sit down with an HRA representative and come up with a plan that not only fits the Innovation Lab, but certainly fits the goals of the city. Our initial discussions were around only allowing that to be available for Edina businesses, but that is up to your input and the input of our HRA representative. The other point that I wanted to bring up regarding our fundraising efforts, we are in what we call the quiet phase of our fundraising campaign. We have not gone public, but we have a select group of individuals that we've been talking to over the last month. To date, for 2022, we have $105,000 pledged for support of the Innovation Lab, and already for 2023, we have $101,250 planned. So I think for the quiet phase, that's a great start to our fundraising efforts. I'm going to skip over this. Mr. Neuendorf gave a great background on how the Innovation Lab came about in our collaboration with the city. I'd like to just take a few minutes to talk about the Edina business climate post-COVID. Many of you are aware of the statement, it's a Navajo proverb that says, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. The PPP loan that businesses received provided the fish to businesses, and it was necessary. They were starving, they needed that lifeline. But now that we've come, hopefully, out on the other side of COVID, so many of these businesses have come to us, come to the chamber, and said, we are now in a position to move forward, but we're not going back to the way things were before COVID. And we're looking at ways that we can innovate and do things differently, and we'd appreciate having those tools available. That's what the Innovation Lab is all about, and we provide that environment. Edina is in a situation, it's one of those great positions to be in, where our land values are higher here, which prevents some businesses from coming into the community, as well as the leasing rates. So what we're trying to do in the Innovation Lab is provide an additional tool to these businesses to allow them to be flexible, be able to pivot, and work around some of the challenges that they may experience on those two fronts. The MinPost had a great article this past July that talked about the business ecosystem in the state of Minnesota. And they talked about the fact that we have a great system in place here that supports startups. And there's a lot of money and tools available for those types of organizations. But the point that they made in this article was we can't just focus on the startups. We have to provide tools and opportunities for businesses that have already been successful in our communities, but want to grow and innovate. This is what we're doing in the Innovation Lab. And their comment was that all of these issues that businesses are facing, we require strategic action from our business leaders our economic developers, chambers of commerce, financial institution, and policymakers. The survival rate and the track record of statewide innovation is at stake here. We need to develop tools to help existing businesses thrive. This slide I'll also go by quickly as Mr. Neuendorf addressed that situation. And now what I'd like to do is turn it over to Annette, and she's going to tell you about the details of the Innovation Lab and what happens there on a day-to-day basis. Annette?
All right. Thank you, Ms. Severson. Welcome, Ms. Wildenauer.
Thank you. I'm very excited. The Innovation Lab is a passion for me. I love watching businesses innovate and grow, and I love watching people be successful. So the Innovation Lab was really developed after doing much research, which has already been shared with you, but what are the things that people really need? And as a small business owner myself, one of the things I've needed is a sounding board, people to get together with, people that will help me think about things in a different way, because it's, as Paul said, it's very lonely. So we offer transformational leadership and transformational thought process to grow your business, helping you think about things that you maybe wouldn't have thought of. We meet for 6 months, twice a month, and a byproduct of that is you build relationships with other business owners that are at the same stage that you are. This is not for startups. Businesses have to be around for at least 3 years and have to have proven a profit. So what ends up happening is we discuss all sorts of things, and we develop a roadmap for each business. Each business brings their business to the class, and they developed their own strategies and their own roadmap of how they're going to be successful, what they need to do. What ends up happening, even better than I thought it would, I thought in concept it would be great, is that they're all learning so much from each other, because somebody might need help with financing, somebody else might need help with marketing, somebody else is like, I got everything in place, I just need more customers. And we brainstorm together, and from a great group of thinking comes great solutions. So we have not done any advertising or marketing. We've been very quiet about it because we wanted to prove the concept. So we have now proven the concept. It's been wildly successful. We are ending the 5th month of our getting together, and have people on a waiting list to be part of the program. So the governance right now, it's run under the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce hired me to put this all together. I'm going to skip over this unless you have some questions, but we're one of you're familiar with Explore Edina, the Edina Chamber, and then the Edina Innovation Lab. So we will all be sharing an office. Right now, we've got who can participate in the program. They have to be willing to do the work. They have to show up. They have to participate. They have to have been in business for 3 years and have shown a profit. Other than that, it's been a very diverse group of people for this first round. And it's really businesses that want to have a contribution to the community. Not every business that is in the Innovation Lab right now is from Edina, but over half are. And the ones that are coming into town always shop when they're here after class. So the curriculum is experiential learning. And I always get this question. I've taught in a mini MBA program, so a lot of our formatting is based off of mini MBA type programming. But what's different is that their case study is put into place every single time. That is really the big differentiator, is that we're not doing theory, they're actually applying it. So they have a discovery sheet that they have to fill out at the end of every class. What does this mean for me? What am I going to do with it? Who do I need to connect with? What do I learn? It's on them to do the homework, but I'm there to help and guide them. We talk about marketing, finance, human relations, all sorts of things. Insurance. Yesterday was about taxes. So we do all of those business things that need to happen, but we do it in a very unusual way, in that it's not just lecture, it's conversation. This is a slide that we have talked about, or you've seen before. The big program is our first program, which is the Accelerator program to help businesses innovate and grow. And that one's kicked off and has been very successful. We are doing purpose programming, and we have started what that programming looks like. We're waiting to make sure we have a space and some money to operate with. Then we'll be moving on that one. Connections have already happened, and that's a big part of it. Life is about relationships. So those connections have already started happening, and then we're about leadership development, which is woven into everything that I teach. This is the first group of participants. Beth Grant, who is here in the audience, is part of that group. And then we have Brave Girl International, which will be working with Edina schools. We've got Buttermilk Basin, Coachinella, Divine Shine, Inherited Stories, LSE Architects, Rachel Michael Stylist, and Viewfinder Optical. Very diverse group of people, very diverse in their businesses. I also want to make sure that we don't have competitive businesses in there. And they have formed an incredible bond that is going to serve them well for the rest of their lives. So how do we stand apart? I've said this before, is that we are case-based. Your business is the case study. That is the big differentiator. I've taught in MBA programs, I've taught with SCORE and a lot of other things, and I wanted to make sure that we were unique. And that uniqueness and the customization that I did with this program is really based on the needs of Edina, the assets that you have in Edina, what kinds of businesses you want to work with or attract. And based on all of those things, I came up with a customized program that is what the Innovation Lab is. We have strategic partnerships, which we've already talked about, so I will go through that. And it is a space where people can come and collaborate, talk, have conversations, ask questions there's no question that's dumb. Just come and ask the question, because somebody else is probably thinking that. It will be a place where they can come and meet themselves. They can meet with me. They can meet with other consultants that might be able to help them. So it becomes that hub. One of the more exciting things is it'll also be a place where we can help young entrepreneurs, high school students. Maybe we'll have college interns that'll come to help work and facilitate. So it will become a business center for people. So they won't have to meet in their car or in a coffee shop.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
Can we just stop on this slide for a minute, because this was one of my big questions, was how we landed on this particular space, since we are talking
sure.
about a loan today.
Sure.
So if you could address that, I'd appreciate
Absolutely. My background is interior design, and I've been in the construction arena my whole life. So when we started looking at spaces, we looked at 11. We looked at existing buildings. We looked at buildings that needed a lot of renovation. We looked at some that needed some renovation. There were no spaces that we could just move into and not do anything, which is typical. So we started looking at that, and then the build-out costs for a shell building, which like the one that we're going into, which is the shell is there, we can do what we want with the inside, versus something that we would have to deplete everything that was in there and start all over. This actually became more cost-effective. Parking was a big consideration. Can people get in and out quickly? So the access of it. And a place that people could easily congregate. So it became, the location was great. And it was actually kind of surprising, because I had looked at 10 other properties, and then I got a call saying, hey, you should really look at this building. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to look at one more. I've looked at 10. But I went and looked at it and called Lori and said, we need to take a look at this. So that was through a lot of footwork, and I think I've seen more buildings in Edina than I knew even existed.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
No, that provides a great overview. And city staff was involved in the process of narrowing down our locations. As Annette mentioned, we looked at accessibility, the amenities of the building, the function of the space. Lease rate was, of course, a huge issue, the build-out cost and everything else that goes along with it. So, yeah, thank you.
Lori, do you want to? Do you have any other questions for me? Okay, thank you.
Stand by. There will probably be questions coming here after we finish.
I won't spend too much time on this. It's the exact same slide that Mr. Neuendorf had up. We're asking for a maximum loan amount of $800,000. We are hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that we are not anywhere near that. We're looking at closer to $600,000, but we're not able to get the final construction costs until we sign a lease. So we just wanted to make sure that we have enough funds available to complete the project. Also in your packet, you'll see...
Does that explain the nature of the proposed loan document, which is a drawdown agreement?
Yes, yes.
Because you're uncertain as to how much you need, but it's capped at $800,000.
Correct.
Up to $800,000. And you have the ability to draw down up to that amount.
Correct.
But you don't think you're going to probably need more than about $650,000?
No, right now, keeping our fingers crossed, it looks like around $600,000. But as I said, we have to check the supply chain and get an updated figure on the cost of supplies. So we just want to make sure that we're able to complete the project and not have to stop not having the funds available. Also in your packet, you have a 5-year projected budget. I think the most important part in looking at that is that our programming revenues increase every year. So that's a really good thing. And then our revenue versus expenses, again, revenues are higher than expenses. We just want to make sure that to whatever degree possible, you feel comfortable that we're supporting ourselves, that the program is sustainable. And the one thing about this pilot program, what it has proved is that we are on the right track, that this is very unique and different, and that it is going to be successful. Mr. Neuendorf already explained to you what some of the other cities are doing in our area. And when we come to you and ask you for this type of partnership, we understand that it's not about handouts, that what we're trying to do is work together to build the future for Edina and Edina businesses. So we appreciate your consideration. We are open to any questions. I know Beth is available as well. So please.
Could you talk a little bit about the fundraising that you're doing and how that might be a risk mitigator for the city on the loan?
Do you want to
If there's any relationship there?
You can go.
Sure.
Or what the anticipated amount is that you might raise?
Well, as I said, we've been kind of quiet at this point, waiting until we know we can, before we ask for too much. But just the interest we've had already, and as Lori outlined, we've got, over $200,000 already committed to, and we know there's other people who are very interested. We just haven't wanted to put our foot on the gas until we know that, try to be good business people here, not get the cart before the horse. If we know we've got everything in place, we've already demonstrated, and I'd say, any business is, you got to start with a good idea, but you have to have commitment and passion. And all I could say is, Lori and Annette have been, we couldn't be in better hands. The passion and interest in this and what we've already accomplished with very little is impressive. So I think the fundraising is going to be, and just what we know without digging deep is deep, and that we should be in very good shape on a fundraising side.
That's helpful. Thank you. Other questions from commissioners at this point in time? Commissioner Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just the $600,000 estimate of what the actual loan amount could be, what factors in there's about $150,000 build-out allowance, correct, from the owner?
Oh, yes.
Do I have that right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and that 150 is part of the reason that you believe that the loan amount would be lower.
Correct.
Did you get him to 200?
Well, what he did, he split out his participation in build-out costs and then in the ability for us to use some of his funds for furniture and that type of equipment that we need. If we don't use it for that, we can put it towards the build-out. So he's been very flexible as to how we can use the funds. But he did cap it at the 149 with the flexibility of another 61,000 to be used for soft materials.
Okay. And the revenue projections that you have, it's more or less based on revenues that come from the cohorts and the additional fundraising. I presume that you anticipate ongoing fundraising in that way.
Yes, I think this program has generated quite a bit of excitement. Initially, we were talking about a 1 to 2 year fundraising campaign, but I think it would benefit us for it to be ongoing. There are organizations like Xcel Energy and Comcast who are interested in a long-term commitment. So I think, yeah, it would behoove us to continue the fundraising campaign. And BIG is going to be our major revenue generator. And then we have some events coming up and some other programming such as Purpose that will add to the programming revenue.
So are you anticipating that, beyond, say, the support when you mentioned Excel, for instance, is it possible that certain departments or startup departments within their organization could utilize the lab? Is that what, are you thinking along those lines at all?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but just to give you an example, Xcel Energy, they, as part of their mission statement, they support small business. So they're looking at this as an add-on to the community work that they do. So that's how they would view it. Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess I'm beginning to think in terms of recruiting, to be honest with you. And so when I look at that, I would also say that there are, in most businesses, there are always startup operations within businesses. And so the ability to focus on that shouldn't start and stop with the creation of a mission statement. But hands-on and even external input can be very useful in those situations. So that's where I thought you were going.
Yeah.
But maybe we arrived at something there anyway.
Well, I think it was twofold. The other piece that's really interesting is we're working with financial institutions for partnerships, as well as accounting firms, and they look at us as a resource to refer their customers. So as an example, a financial institution, a business came to a financial institution for a business loan, and they said, we're really interested in what you're doing, but we'd like to consider, or you to consider, going through the Edina Innovation Lab first, then come back to us and we'll take another look at your loan request. And I don't know, is there anything that you want to add to?
I also think that the ability to pivot is what we need to be doing and innovate. So as things come up and people bring things up that needs that they might have, my background is in customized training and in doing custom programs for people. And that's something we have not considered as part of our revenue, but it would be part of the revenue as those needs come up and as it makes sense. So we need to be able to pivot. We know that the big program is going to be successful because we've already piloted that. But I think there are going to be other opportunities that we haven't thought of yet, which is part of being innovative.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
More or less. I mean, it's clear that you're thinking about it.
Absolutely.
And I guess that we want to make sure that for sure 7 years works out pretty well.
Well, and as we didn't know 4 years ago what it would look like today, we can't know what it's going to look like in 4 years, and we have to be flexible enough to be able to pivot and reinvent ourselves.
So the central point of my question is really, how will you recruit the cohorts? If we anticipate that these revenues are going to come largely from the essentially tuitions that they're paying, then what is the long-term plan in recruiting cohorts? I would suspect that you'd have a lot of enthusiasm initially, and that I can see a class that's in here coming forward, but how does it work out over the long haul?
Well, word of mouth is going to be one of our key factors. People who have already gone through the program, who are already referring people to be part of the program. I think if we're known as an innovation center for businesses, small businesses, I think people will lean on us to help them be innovative. So we have to be in front of all of that and really lead that charge. And we have to keep refreshing ourselves. We can't get stagnant. So we're going to have to keep moving the needle, and I love doing that. That's super fun for me. I'm like, yeah, let's do something new and creative, and also fairly good about vetting it to make sure it's going to work. I don't like to be too risky.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't here, I think, the first time that this was presented, so I didn't get a chance to make any comments. So I don't actually have any questions, but I did want to make a few comments. I think this is an awesome idea, and the first thing that comes to mind for me is just to say, aren't we blessed as a community to be able to invest in this opportunity completely within the resources that are within the community. And so I am actually on the board of a nonprofit in a different community and have been chairing the campaign committee for a little over a year now. And we're still trying to raise funds to support an incubator in that particular community. And so I think, one, we should think about that, right? We are fortunate as a community to be in a position to even be able to have a vote to offer a loan to start this innovation lab within the community. The other thing that I thought was definitely awesome is this idea of being able to support women and minority businesses. And when Ms. Severson and I met, I think we probably went through she was trying to go through the material with me, and I kept stopping her. I'm like, why are we talking about this? This is something that we should be doing. And not only do I think we should be considering this loan, but as a city, we should be offering scholarships for businesses that we want to be in our community. And I think it is a self-sustaining model. And I love the quote, the quote that you shared. But one of my favorite quotes, and I don't know if I shared this with you or not when we talked, is from Nelson Henderson that says the true meaning of leadership is planting seeds without expecting to benefit from their shade. And to me, that's what this is, an opportunity to do that. And when you layer on the additional opportunity to work within the school system to start to teach kids about entrepreneurship at such an early age within the same structure. So I think it definitely becomes a process that I think would definitely benefit the community in the long run. And so we talked about that. And then, of course, I asked, well, how is this going to be financially stable? What does your balance sheet look like? What are the terms of the loan? We are responsible. We have fiduciary responsibility for those resources. But looking through the projections, you can see that the revenues, and it's on your slide, the revenues that you're expecting to generate should cover the cost of the loan. However, when I also think about the fundraising aspect, I would not be surprised if it didn't take you 5 years to pay back the loan. And so I just think I was impressed by what I saw, and it definitely has my support to move forward. And then the last thing I would say, and I don't know if this is where Commissioner Anderson was going or not, but the question about others outside of the community, I also think it's great in this kind of a cohort model to have business leaders in the community coming in and also working with these small businesses to help them be successful as well. The more of these that go through that become successful, the more they are also able to invest in their own community as well. So I applaud you for putting this together and bringing it to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pierce. Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for this presentation. As you know, I had a lot of questions last time you were here, and I did meet with Lori, with President Severson, and we got a lot of support letters from members of the business community, which makes a big difference. This is broadly supported across the community, and I was really pleased to hear that. Sort of in no particular order, the questions I had were about governance. I'm satisfied that this is part of the Chamber of Commerce. It's a known quantity. That was unclear before, and I really thank you for going into detail on that. The research of the sites was very important. We have a lot of commercial buildings in the city, and I'm pleased to hear that you did look at a lot of them, and that was really important. It looks like there's lots of demand for this service. It does fit a niche that is not currently being filled, which is always a good place for a business to land, not competing with other services. I think this is a sustainable model, and I love the fact that you're going to be flexible as things change, because we really don't know, can't see into the future, and it looks like you're poised to be able to manage that and do so successfully. And finally, the partnerships. I was really, really pleased to see all the different partnerships that you've reached out to. Because we're coming at this from the HRA perspective, it's important that this is something that builds community as well as business. And so I love the fact you're working with SCORE, that you're working with the schools, and that your list of partnerships continues to grow. I'm really impressed with that, and thank you. I know it is, I've had in my career here lots of people reach out to me saying that small business is important but under talked about part of our community. And I always listen very carefully, because people who run small businesses are passionate and they're at risk. And I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to give this level of support and, friendship and peer support. So that really means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the people who reach out to me as an elected official. We've just gone through twin pandemics, one long-term of racism, one short-term of COVID, but boy, it has uprooted a lot of our business models. So the opportunity to address this is wonderful, and I'm so pleased to see this come forward. Edina is going to benefit from some of the changes that come forward out of the economy, and so in this new economy, so I'm really pleased that we're going to be poised to make that happen and to make it strong and make it equitable and really get some excitement going. So thank you so much, and thanks to everybody who reached out in support. So I'm in favor of this. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member
Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I must tell you that I walked in here today, and I've been thinking for the last few days about, I'm kind of on the fence, saying, gee whiz, I don't know, is this stewards, is this the approach that we want to take? It's not the loan aspect that bothers me at all. I mean, Member Jackson was inquiring about demonstrated ability to repay in your initial presentation. Then, we take a look at the interest rate, and that's been brought up by various communications along the way. And then the default remedies, which are really, we don't even want to consider them, but they're there, and is that going to be adequate if it came to that, which we don't anticipate, to be candid. And so those objective reasons for consideration we should be thinking in terms of. But this isn't really about that, is it? I mean, this is really on a far more subjective basis. It's really about what is the best thing for our community, and can we, to parallel Commissioner Pierce's comments, we have the ability to do this. While I'm not in love with the forgiveness aspect of that, which is the only thing I would really question, because I don't know that it will be necessary for you, but it could be necessary for somebody else to have access to those funds. It's part of what we're considering today, and I don't want to let that offset the potential great outcomes that you can achieve. So I guess when we look on the whole, what direction are we going here? And how do we support the community, and how do we draw business to the community? How do we make this a thriving enterprise going forward? Then I'd say this could be a big piece of it. So you've brought me around this morning in terms of coming off the fence, because the quality of the people involved and your commitment, your anticipation, your ability to make this work is really what's impressive. And to all the people that might review this proceeding and have opinions, that's really what they should be focusing on as I've come to this morning. So thank you for all your hard work in putting that together. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Across America, I've observed over time, as I've been the mayor of our community, the efforts that different communities all across the country have made to try to support small business and accelerators, innovators, innovation labs, some kind of support of business generally. And I think Ms. Severson mentioned this last time she was here, but we have known that historically the three-legged stool, if you will, the three-legged stool of the city, the business community, and the school district is, over time, the stool that has created the stability and opportunity for the entire city of Edina. Last week, we did a proclamation, actually it was Tuesday, I guess, Tuesday this week, we did a proclamation in support of small business, first one we've ever done, recognizing that there are over 2,000 small businesses in our community. And as I was sitting listening this morning, and I'm all enthusiastic about this idea, as you all know, and I'll tell you why. This is a distinct opportunity in my mind from what I've seen around the rest of the country. I was thinking about all of the money that we've invested in housing, different kinds of housing. We've invested as a community millions of dollars in making sure that we've got this whole diverse housing stock. But when we look at business, we think about all the different kinds of businesses that are just, they're nascent. They're along the path to maybe success, maybe failure. There are large businesses here. There are big medical businesses here. There are national businesses here. There are financial services businesses here. We have supported them in many different ways. This is the first time we can really help grow businesses in our community with this innovation lab. And if they go somewhere else in the region, that's good for the whole region. That's good for Minnesota. So this, the forgiveness part of it, I view as more of an investment. And when I think about the investment that other communities are making just in our region, millions of dollars in small business support, as Mr. Neundorf said, small business development centers, our investment here is very modest. And when you think about that investment that we're making and that loan that we're making, I think, and then you think about risk management, I can't think of a better use of spark funds than this. I mean, that's money that we set aside. It was close to $9 million. Even if we make this loan, we're going to have close to $6 million left. This loan comes back, these monies come back, and we can set up this revolving loan fund. So the legislature said you can take these unused TIF funds and aggregate them, and in this time of kind of economic challenge, we get to make sure that people stay working. We get to use this for construction and build out. And I think that's the win-win. That's the win-win of it that I like, the use of these spark funds. It gets the innovation lab up and going, and it creates jobs for workers during a period of some economic uncertainty. And I think that is really an important consideration. It's also part of the risk management. I mean, it's still taxpayer money, I realize that. But we're using spark funds as opposed to saying to the people in our community, well, we're going to raise your property taxes because we think this is a good investment. We're not doing that. And then we're also thinking about contemplating the use of ARPA funds to help build out that portion of the innovation lab that would relate to dealing with high school students, as Member Pierce said. So I think that's also a fabulous sort of investment of the use of national monies that are paid to us by taxpayers all over the country, including our own. And then help mitigating all of that is the tuition, is your economic model, which is so distinct from anything that I've seen in the country. None of them charge tuition that I've seen, or they charge rent, and the rent is just modest. And then there's a constant sort of government subsidy of that building, that rent, and everything else that goes along with it. So I just think that this is a wonderfully unique creation that you've come up with, all of you, in thinking this through. And I know Manager Neal and I have been a little closer to this than my colleagues, and it was important, I think, to have that presentation last time and then come back in more detail, because it really helped people understand things that I've been able to see for years and trying to figure out how we can do this in Edina. I can't think of a better way to do this in Edina than the way that you're proposing doing it. So I'm all in on this too. So sounds like you got a unanimous decision here this morning. So is there a motion to approve the loan agreement as shown with the Edina Chamber of Commerce to establish the Edina Innovation Lab at 7201 Metro Avenue in Edina?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves, Commissioner Pierce seconds the motion as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye. Aye. Opposed? Carried. Very
Thank
good.
you all very
Thank
much.
you.
And I
Thank
hope
you.
that when your time allows, you'll come and visit the lab.
Yeah, well,
Thank
and it's the building too, we didn't talk much about that. I think it's a great spot. There's energy just in that new building or the building to be renovated. And that's an important thing too.
Wonderful. Thank you again.
All right. See you all soon. Okay, we're a little off schedule here. As I see that we had been talking about a 45-minute period of time to talk about the updated tax increment financing policy. So should we get as much done as we can?
Yeah, Mr. Neuendorf thinks he can whip through this topic pretty quickly, I understand.
Yes. This should
As long
not
as
be
the
new.
HRA commissioners don't get in the way of it, right? Yeah. So, but we don't need I think this is something we're not asking necessarily for action today. I think this
We
is
were
something-
asking for action. We had intended to ask for action today. If
Don't
you're prepared,
require action
we
today.
would take that. If you're not, we can postpone it.
Yeah, getting the updated policy approved today or the next meeting isn't critical, is it? Well, I'm holding you up. Go to work.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so let me walk through it. So 2 months ago, we brought forward to you a recommendation to update our TIF policy. We have an existing policy. It's one page. It has served us well for 12 years, but it oftentimes results in questions and confusions. And so we're recommending that we update that policy to give a little bit more insight, not just, well, to many folks, to staff, to our consultants, to developers, and most importantly, to our community. So let me go through, I'll skip through some of the things that we always talk about. So the objectives, when we've prepared this policy update, is to clarify the intention and purpose of when TIF can be used. Typically, it cannot be used. The typical rule is we're not using TIF, but from time to time, it's necessary and it's requested, and so the intention here is to identify that sliver of situations where it might be appropriate. We also want to clarify the process when the city and the HRA considers TIF. We want to set the expectations regarding transparency, what information is available about TIF. We also want to identify the parameters when we consider creating a new TIF district. We typically try to keep it as small as we possibly can for as short of a time as we possibly have to. We want to set and clarify the minimum expectations that we have for developers. And then finally, establish the financial guidelines that we use when we underwrite and prepare any kind of TIF contract. So the first one, the intention and the purpose. As I mentioned, most projects in Edina are privately financed using typical equity and debt investments. Sometimes there's weird things. Sometimes, they should be privately financed, and sometimes there's just something odd. And so I still think that from time to time, TIF can be a useful tool. TIF is governed by the state law, but in Edina historically, and even today and in the future, we use TIF to a less extent than would be allowed by state law, and that has served us well, that general approach. In addition to the limitations of state law, and frankly, it's not a very generous state law, but it's we work within it. In addition, Edina adds an additional criteria that the use of TIF has to deliver a public benefit. That's the biggest differentiator in Edina's TIF policy. The idea being that the use of TIF isn't strictly to benefit the developer so they can make a profit and build a project. It's to help transform the community and provide a permanent, long-lasting benefit to the community at large. So we reviewed the Vision Edina, the comprehensive plan, the small area plans, all those guiding documents, and the box on the right here are examples of those types of public benefits where TIF might be worth discussing. Projects that seek transformational change. For example, in the Southdale area, some of those projects, they were built in the 60s. Frankly, they're tired. They don't really serve the community well. And in order to make a transformational change on those properties, it requires a huge investment. TIF can help offset some of that. The review process. We currently require that a TIF application be submitted. We want to make sure that the TIF dollars are the last money in, and that we're the last people that the developer talks to rather than the first people. The developer is also responsible for paying any city fees related to their request. If we have to hire an attorney, a financial advisor, which we do, those bills go to the developer. It's also important to have a single point of contact as we prepare these TIF negotiations. It's just easiest if you have one set of negotiations happening. But in every situation, we want to make it emphatically clear that the final decision regarding the use of TIF rests with the City Council and the HRA. Oftentimes we hear comments that the developers are running the show, the developers are doing this. Final authority rests with your body and with the City Council. Regarding reporting and transparency, we follow a combination of best practices as well as what's required by state and local laws. So there's a variety of different reports that are issued every year. Highlights are posted on the website. The additional information is out there if people want it, but we wanted to set that expectation. The fourth, when we set up a new district, we always try to limit the size and the scope, and we make sure that whatever is intended for those boundaries are consistent with our comprehensive plan. We have, in the last several years, we've applied our newer community engagement process using the Better Together platform, in addition to hybrid, online, and in-person comments. We always work with our schools and our county in advance so that they're not surprised by this. So now we've always done it, but now we've put it in the policy that we will do it, we shall do it. One thing that we also added to the policy was a consideration of early decertification. Sometimes TIF districts just don't move as fastly as we would think. And sometimes it begs the question, should we decertify it? Rather than waiting 25 years, do we decertify it early? It's not always a yes or, it's not an easy yes or an easy no. You've got to work on the strategy. But it's important to consider that in those occasions. When it comes to minimum expectations of the developer and the outcomes that are expected, we think it's important that the policy identify clearly what those expectations are. In the last several years, we've developed those Greater Southdale design guidelines. We've adopted small area plans. Oftentimes those set goals, but the goals are sometimes very broad. So when it comes to TIF, it's always best if we can tell the developers what we want, what the bar is to consider TIF. So if they need to come in and make a proposal that would completely ignore the Southdale design guidelines or the small area plan, that's not the right project for TIF. So let's put that in the policy. We've also have a policy about public parking that while state law allows us to provide TIF for private parking, historically Edina has never done that. I don't think we want to start doing that. So let's put that clearly in the policy that we will help support public parking, but not exclusively private parking. We've also added sections on collaborative partnerships, fair labor standards, construction mitigation, and effort to promote diversity and equity in the construction industry. We've incorporated most of these in our recent TIF agreements, but the idea here is that in order for a developer to receive a pledge of TIF, they have to work with the community and establish collaborative partnerships, maybe working with neighbors, neighborhood groups, business associations, or other associations to have a community benefit, not just a singular developer doing their project. We think that'll be better for the project, better for the community, also better in securing third-party grants. Most grant funders now require that. And the last element here is clear financial guidelines. When it comes to the use of TIF, best practice is what we employ. We rely strongly on our outside advisors at Ehlers and at Dorsey and Whitney to make sure that the returns to the developer satisfy the but-for test. But for the use of TIF, that project of that quality and that scale and that caliber would not go forward. There's different ways that developers can get sneaky and hide the numbers and have an extra fee here and have a padded budget there. that's not when we use TIF. So we scrutinize their pro formas quite thoroughly, and it's our recommendation to identify those areas in the TIF policy. So in a nutshell, those are the highlights in the updated policy. It's been completely rewritten based on your last comments to reposition it to clearly say that typically we don't use TIF, but if we have to use TIF, here's what you have to do to meet those TIFs, or to meet our standards. It's also been restructured to put the public expectations up front. So there's a whole section added about the public benefits that can be secured with TIF. And that was kind of hidden in the back. We moved that to the front. I think it's a better document. I think your comments are really helpful. So the updated policy has been in your packet. I did work with Commissioner Jackson yesterday, helping me find a couple typos and one thing that I forgot. So thank you for that. The finalized version is in your packet. I'm ready for any questions. If you're willing to take action today, that'd be great. If you want to wait till the next meeting, that's fine too.
I'll just follow on quickly with that final comment you made. It was a good work product, and I want to thank Commissioner Jackson for making it a better product. And it looks good. Questions for Manager Neuendorf on the proposed updated TIF policy? So I think we've looked at this a few times. Is there a motion to approve the updated policy to be followed when considering the use of tax increment financing for projects in the city of Edina?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Pierce, to approve the updated policy to be followed when considering the use of tax increment financing in the city of Edina. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And this is the rapid round.
Thank you. So in the executive director's report, we had 3 items purely for information, just to get the conversation started. And I don't have notes in front of me, but one of them was regarding the Pentagon Park Lot 4. Earlier this week, the City Council held a public hearing on the approval of a bank there. The HRA has rights to accept or reject a transfer of property. So just to let you know that if that project secures its zoning, staff has prepared, actually our legal advisors have prepared that transfer documentation. So if that project moves forward, we'll make sure that it's a streamlined process through the HRA commitments as well. No TIF would be directed to that project at all. The TIF has already been invested in the roads and the sewers and everything else that's on site today. But just want to let you know that we're coordinating efforts there. Also in your packet is an initial strategy at future use of these spark funds. Not seeking any action, and I know we don't have time for discussion, but the clock is running. Last year we established a fund with about $9.6 million that can be used for construction in Edina that creates jobs and helps revive parts of the community. We're recommending, staff is currently putting together a plan to help distribute those funds. We're currently looking at a 3-part strategy to have 3 programs. One would be a simple program, a grant fund to help existing businesses update their spaces. That would be capped at $25,000. That is intended to be a simple program. Then there's a medium type program that also helps existing businesses or maybe new businesses that are moving into a space. That could be funded up to $150,000. There's a little bit more flexibility in that program, but there's also a lot more paperwork in that program. But we think that also addresses a niche of businesses that are here. And then finally, we also would have a program for larger investments. And this is where I think the example we had this morning with the Edina Chamber of Commerce is a great example. Sometimes you have these opportunities, and it's not a $50,000 project, it's not a $100,000 project, it could be a $5 million project. With the laws that govern the Spark program, the HRA has flexibility that we never had before to provide loans below market loans, at market loans. We can make equity investments in different types of businesses. The condition is that they have to rehab a building or build a new building, and they have to create jobs. So there's a lot of flexibility there. We have until 2025 to use these dollars, and this is the type of program where we either use it by 2025 or we return it to the county. Our recommendation is to use the dollars here in Edina. So just wanted to alert you that staff is working on those kinds of programs. Happy to take any input, of course, but we're hoping to have something more formal put together in January, February, so that we could start releasing some of these programs in April or May of next year. So just want to make sure that that was on your radar, and we can always talk about it at a later date.
That begged for me a question about the process of lending money. We just had an example of that on a 7-year loan basis. This money has to be used by the end of December 2025. The money coming back over a period of years after December 31, 2025, does that have to immediately go to the county, or is that something we can recapture and use again because we used it the first time before that cutoff date?
That's an excellent question, and that's where we have the opportunity to establish this revolving loan fund. So we've had extensive conversations with our legal advisors. If we use the funds once and deploy the money by the end of 2025, we satisfy the state law to use those funds. So if it's repaid over the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, when it's returned to us, it is now not subject to TIF obligations, to Spark obligations, or other state obligations. It's funds that would be available to the HRA to use in whatever way a future group felt achieved the goals of the HRA. We've never had this opportunity before. So
this is an incredible opportunity.
That's why I'd really urge us to take advantage of that so that we can have a sustainable funding source for investments here for years to come.
Yeah. So how are you going to get the word out? What's your marketing strategy?
Exactly. Yeah. Stay tuned. We'll come back to you in the spring with that one. I just want to make sure that it's on your radar, so we didn't want to surprise you in the spring.
Okay.
I think there was one other item that I forgot.
Oh, you had a report out on all the different development projects.
Yeah, other projects. So there's a project update, a status update. We only get to meet as this HRA board once, maybe twice a month from time to time. Just wanted to remind you all and let you know Ms. Hawkinson and myself are working every day, even when we're not meeting with you, on a variety of projects. So we provided a status update on all of the projects and programs that we're currently working on. We typically do that twice a year, and so this is the fall update for that project list. We will do it again in January when we submit our year in review report. That'll give a little bit more detailed information about what was finished in 2022. But today's update is where all these various projects stands, and there's quite a few if you've looked at the list.
One curiosity I had was with regard to a project that I think is coming that's not on the list, and that was the building on stilts over by the Hilltop, the Grazzini building. You know, I heard that was up for sale and that somebody had a tentative agreement with them and had been to the city to discuss anything. Is there anything worth talking about there yet, or is it still in the quiet stage?
That's still in the quiet stage, as he speaks that into a microphone on television.
All right.
Staff has met with the developer who is, my understanding is that they're currently working on a sales contract. They don't, I think that both parties agree that they will move to that in that direction. So we had an initial conversation about zoning and small area plans and that type of thing. I would expect them to have their paperwork done in the next few months and probably submit a sketch plan to the council spring sometime of next year. Right now, that's an office building. The property's owned for office, and they want to do something other than office. So they have to visit and go through our zoning review process.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have questions? All right, anything else? Executive Director?
Just one quick thing to let you know that we are working on your calendar for the upcoming year. We're getting some input from the 2 new HRA commissioners before we do that, but that'll come back to you at the next meeting, at which we've got a pretty full agenda, and you'll have a healthy dose of Ms. Hawkinson at that meeting.
All right, any HRA commissioner comments?
Just real briefly, I would like to have a public work session about economic development at some point in time. We've got so much going on. I'd like to be able to have the public have a sense of understanding what we're doing. So whether it's educational or whatever. So just put that on in the pot to think about. Thank you.
Very good. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Pierce moves we adjourn. Commissioner Jackson seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjourning the HRA meeting on this 17th day of November, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned. Good work.